mutual respect down, but that also means you, the parent, are respecting your child and giving them a voice and
Yeah.
doing all, listening to them and allowing them to negotiate and argue and like all of the things. Like respect doesn't mean that your child blindly obeys your orders.
Mm-hmm.
That is
Mm-hmm.
not respect.
Welcome to the Relational Parenting Podcast. I'm Jennifer Hayes, a parent coach and 20-year childcare veteran. Each week, I sit down with my own father, Rick Hayes, and discuss the complicated issues that parents face today, as well as some of the oldest questions in the book. From the latest research and the framework of my relational parenting method, we offer thought-provoking solutions to your deepest parenting struggles. Added bonuses include intergenerational wounding discussions and guest childcare experts. We will also start taking your parenting questions in episode 5, so be sure to comment with your biggest questions or email me directly at jenny@jennyb.co. Let's get started.
To go in depth, and then I was like, wait, this is content. Shut up. Like to me,
That's
to
right.
myself, like shut
Yeah.
up, like
Yeah.
answer his questions on air. So
I get it. Cool. Yeah, let's go. Let's go. I got the first one here in front of me now.
So yeah, welcome back everybody to the Relational Parenting Podcast. We are here this week and we are talking about how to set boundaries in a relational way. So how to set boundaries as a relational parent, because it's not all about rainbows and butterflies. We have to have rules and limitations and help our kids get through life in a safe way. So, let's see. I wanted to start with just talking real quickly about the 4 commonly known parenting styles. They're known as the authoritative, authoritarian, permissive, or uninvolved parent. And authoritative is kind of what we're aiming at with relational parenting. Authoritative parenting is when they are encouraging their kids to be responsible and think for themselves, considering the reasons for the rules, but they're also very empathetic and responsive to big emotions. We're not shutting emotions down or anything like that, but we're a confident parent who can handle big emotions. We can also set boundaries and remain consistent in those boundaries. Authoritarian parenting is a parent who expects their orders to be obeyed without question and rely on punishment or threat of punishment in order to control your kids. And it's a fear-based parenting model. So your children are afraid of you or afraid of the punishment that they're going to endure when they make mistakes, etc.
Which could be stuff like shame and guilt and
Yep. Or all
right.
the shame and guilt and lack of self-confidence, lack of knowing themselves because they're just following your orders instead of being able to negotiate or talk about things or make mistakes and like it's okay. Everybody makes mistakes.
Work on learning the rules. Yeah.
And so permissive parents are responsive and warm towards their children. So they respond to emotions. They're very warm and loving, which is a great thing, but they are reluctant to enforce rules. So they might set a rule, but then let their kid repeatedly get away with breaking the rule. Or they might not set any rules out of the belief that a child should just have complete freedom to explore with no boundaries. And we know from research that children do not thrive from no boundaries, no rules outside of like safety, like don't run in front of the car.
Children run out in front of cars with no boundaries. Yeah.
But the parents who, someone that we would label as a permissive parent is someone who is letting their child get away with murder. And no matter what their child does, their child can do no wrong. Their child is just a kid, and anything they do is just chalked up to them being a kid or being young, or they cover up what their kid does and their child never experiences a natural consequence of any kind. And this is where we have adults who are entitled and incapable of taking care of themselves or leading a healthy lifestyle because no one ever showed them how to. They were just free falling through life.
I ran into
and then
that
uninvolved
on the school board.
You what?
I ran into that on the school board. Parents, kids coming to a school dance, middle school age, not so much youngers, but middle school age. Kids are, have a little freer range of action. Kids would show up, and they showed up with snappers with rubber bands and paper clips, running around snapping other kids at the dance, and wouldn't quit once confronted. They were caught a couple of times and were finally ejected, and parents were upset that they had to come get their kids because they would not behave at the word of another authority figure. And it's like, well,
yeah,
no, you're still paying for the dance, $6 or something. It's like, no, you're not getting your money back. And yes, your child may not come back to 2 or 3 more events. They must there's a tribe here, and they must behave in such a way that they're not ruining everybody else's
must just
good
not
time.
Cause harm. Your child was causing harm. They were given multiple warnings, requested to stop, and they chose to continue. So they were removed from their ability. That's a boundary. That's a very healthy boundary. You don't get to cause harm to these other children.
That's what I
thought.
The
end.
There were 3 or 4 parents, man. They did not agree with that. And I was kind of like, well, I'd like to talk to you and see what makes you think that's okay. But we never were that chatty about it. Anyway.
So the 4th style is called uninvolved parenting, where they offer their children very little emotional support. So they're not super responsive when their child is upset or happy or anything. They're just kind of like, yeah, okay. Or they ignore the tantrum, or they, so uninvolved and fail to enforce standards of conduct. And so I have a chart that I'm going to put a link to in the notes with these 4 parenting styles. And it's just a really helpful visual for people because it's 4 boxes, and in each box is one of the parenting styles. And so it makes 2 columns and 2 rows. And so authoritative parenting falls into the demanding category and the sensitive and responsive. So authoritative parenting, we have expectations and boundaries, but we also are extremely responsive and empathetic when our child is experiencing hard emotions, mental struggles, etc. Authoritarian is demanding and stern and punitive. So obey me or else.
Yeah.
Permissive.
Power. It's kind of a threat of power as opposed to reason.
I'm in charge. You're
back
little.
To the internal. You got to make them internally motivated to do that, not for fear of a baseball bat coming down from the sky. Yeah.
I always think of Matilda when I think of authoritarian. The movie Matilda with the little girl and the dad, Danny DeVito.
It's been a while.
Standing over Matilda and saying, "I'm smart, you're dumb. I'm old, you're young. whatever, and like yelling at her, like, I know everything and you're just a dumb little kid, and like, get out of here,
Yeah.
That's what I think of when I think of authoritarian. Permissive is in the categories doesn't enforce limits, but is sensitive and responsive.
Yeah.
And then uninvolved are stern and punitive and do not enforce limits and don't have expectations. So anyway, I'll link that in the show notes. It's just like a really helpful visual, and it's a really great breakdown of the kind of the 4 most common styles of or approaches that parents take to parenting. And it really helped me in the past identify some of the I want to be sensitive and responsive. I also want to set boundaries and hold limits because children need those things.
Yeah.
and where am I falling into the categories now, and how do I get to where I want to be?
That's the thing to
So,
keep in mind is everything's a continuum like that. It's like, well, you can't be completely sensitive and responsive. You have to do some pushback on to create. Otherwise, there's no such thing as a boundary if you don't clip it off somewhere. So
right.
it's those quadrant things. I like to keep them in my head, but they are a guideline, not a you can't look at them too hard because they're not granular enough.
Yeah.
That's a good grid. That's a good
So,
grid.
why does any of this matter? Because having boundaries is, we're all about right. We're called the Relational Parenting Podcast. And inside of healthy relationship, functional relationship, whether it's a romantic partner or a friendship or a sibling or parent to child, inside of a relationship, there are boundaries, because every person is a unique person with different needs and love languages and all of these things. And so we must set boundaries with those that we love in order to let them know what our needs are and how to love us, right?
Mm-hmm,
And your
mm-hmm.
children are going to learn from you how to set their own boundaries once they are adults, but also as they are children.
Yeah.
Children get to have boundaries as well.
Yeah.
And so teaching your child what healthy boundaries are. So I just want to say real quick too, boundaries, I think most people think of like drawing a line in the sand or putting up a fence. This is my boundary, don't cross it.
Mm-hmm.
And I just want to say that it's more like you are opening, there's a fence. You have a yard. So as a human
Mm-hmm.
being, this is your imaginary yard. You have an
My
imaginary yard around you
This is my
in your space
personality
bubble.
or my identity. Yeah.
Yeah, and this is your space bubble around you, and there is an imaginary fence around you, but there's a door. Maybe there's 3 or 4 or 5 or 7 doors or gates in order to, open and be near you, be close to you, be connected to you. And what your boundaries are is your knowing of what those doors are. So a boundary is, I need to be spoken to in this way. I need to. So instead of saying, let's see, how do I want to say this? Oh, a positive way to set a boundary, and I'm going to get back to what I was talking about, but instead of saying, don't talk to me like that, right? That's a wall.
Mm-hmm.
Don't do that to me.
Mm-hmm.
You invite someone in instead. You create a door for them to speak to you the way you want to be spoken to. And you can say, I can't hear you when you talk to me like that. I need you to lower your voice and try again, please.
Mm-hmm.
And that opens a door for someone to connect with you
Mm-hmm.
instead of shutting them down and blocking them from you.
Yep. Yeah.
And
That's true of any relationship, whether it's two adults or whether it's your kids, back to kids or people too. We all have boundaries. We all have histories and baggage and preferences that created those boundaries, at least the ones we're aware of. There's always a place behind us where there's boundaries that we don't see, that it takes us a long time to learn about. I like this metaphor. And if you're going to mesh up against somebody else, to get the doors in the same places and stuff, that requires learning, training. Maybe you
well,
could
yeah,
think
for
of
someone to know where your doors are, how to open those doors.
Yeah.
How can I get to you?
I open my door like in a hotel, in an adjoining room. I open my door and there's a wall there. It's like, well, there ought to be a door here, even if it's not open.
Yeah.
Okay, is it locked or not? Or do I know how to communicate this way? That's a terrific metaphor. I like that.
Thanks. I just came up with that.
And it's
But also you said something about the boundaries behind you, and there's a lot of people who don't actually know what their
no,
boundaries are
yeah,
because they were raised in a household with authoritarian parenting
yeah.
or permissive parenting
Either way,
where
yeah,
no one taught them what a boundary was, or their boundaries were constantly bulldozed over
yeah.
and
Yeah,
disregarded.
or they just were have not been in an environment, or you've been shielded and you don't know another way. There's all kinds of reasons why you might not know where all of your boundaries and communication channels are, because
Yeah.
might be just because they've never been exercised. You're in a yeah, two families, two
Right.
people merging, getting to know how another family works requires a little bit of, and it can't always be, hey, you're violating my boundary. Sometimes it's like, well, I need to find their door. How do
Mhm.
they communicate this? I mean, as long as nobody's bleeding, as long as nobody's getting hurt, then that's just communication. That's a good metaphor
Well,
for
yeah, there's going to
communication,
be
right?
new boundaries to navigate as you meet new people or get into relationship with new people, or,
Right?
the longer you're married, new situations and stuff come up, and boundaries get renegotiated and discussed because
Yeah,
there might be something in you that you just haven't discovered yet.
you have to adapt.
But
Yeah,
just in general, like, children are not traditionally taught to find their boundaries inside of themselves and speak them out
hmm,
loud. And then they are not, once they do, because children will speak their boundaries,
yeah,
um, if they're not trained on how to do that respectfully and relationally, or if when they express a boundary, a parent bulldozes and violates the boundary constantly,
yeah,
then we grow up into adults who either disregard our own boundaries and don't take care of ourselves, and put ourselves in situations that are like dangerous or suck our energy or are
yeah.
toxic, in a million different ways.
Drain, depression. Yeah,
Mhm.
there's all
Or
kinds
we
of ways
become
that just
people pleasers who
drains you.
don't
Yeah,
develop our own personality or wants or interests. We just follow whoever the next like interesting person is, a friend
yeah,
or a lover or whatever, and we never
yeah,
figure out who the fuck we are.
yeah. Yeah, it seems like a lot more people running around expecting the world to conform to their expectations, their boundaries, their wishes, and not being so good at adapting or learning or just adapting to the world as it is, or the situation they're in, the people they're around as
Well,
it is.
that's a whole other topic
Yeah, yeah.
you're bringing up there.
I'm just thinking through this metaphor. I really like this metaphor. The whole boundaries thing. That's a framework for discussing all kinds of things, and it's very important. I think the upshot is it's very important we to teach our kids, to model for our kids adaptivity, and what's a good boundary, what's a bad boundary, why do I have a boundary, what's going on here. Think about our communication.
Okay, so that's perfect because we are going to talk about what actually is a boundary, not
Yeah.
what is something that bothers me that I'm going to torture everyone else over. Okay, because their adaptability is important. You
Yeah.
can't control the people around you. You can only
Right.
control yourself.
That's right.
And so part of boundaries is your choice to, if it's actually something that they're doing to you that's harmful, or is it something that you're simply being triggered by and you need to explore that inside of yourself.
Yeah.
And so we're going to talk about the distinction of what a boundary really is versus a punitive trigger that you need to work on yourself.
Yeah. Yeah.
And parents specifically, I'm talking to parents right now, because once you can identify what your true value based boundaries are, you can release and let go of all of the triggery shit that you don't need to react to anymore.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that will teach your children to do the same, to be adaptable.
Yeah.
And these are my these are my 5 boundaries right now that I know of, or whatever.
Yeah.
So what's actually a boundary and what's just being a difficult person who's trying to make everyone else in the room conform to something.
That sounds like the roots of getting to choosing your battles. What's a real value? What's just okay, fine, move on.
Yeah.
Don't not letting everything bother you equally.
Right. So what I was getting to was the why. Why are boundaries important? Because boundaries are not a fence to block people off from you. A boundary is actually a way of opening a door to someone to allow connection. And the whole goal of relational parenting is that we are building a foundation of connection between parents and children so that you can grow healthy, happy human beings who know how to function in the world.
So they can go out and do that in the world. Yeah.
You have to know how to be in relationship with people. You have to know how to be in relationship with yourself and how to be in relationship to your environment and everything else in order to navigate ups, downs, trials, everything that life comes with.
Yeah. Resilience.
So boundaries. All right. Step number 1 is everyone needs to go grab a journal and a pen and write down the question, what are my boundaries? Do you even know what your boundaries are? And we're going to distinguish between boundaries versus triggers. Boundaries
sounds like fun.
versus triggers. Okay. So there might be 100,000 triggers that live in your body. When my child screams, when my child doesn't listen, when my child does this, when my partner does that, when there's dishes in the sink instead of being put into the dishwasher that's 10 inches away. Like everyone's got triggers. Okay. And if you want to make it even deeper, there's deeply traumatic triggerings that some people live with, right? So so triggers are can be information. They can also just be little annoyances that you need to just move on from and get over.
Or noises, or a trigger could probably technically be anything.
But a trigger is an internal reaction. Okay, a boundary. The difference is that a boundary is based on your values as a person and as a family. Okay, what are your values as a family that you want your children to take on and live out in the world? What are your household, family values? And when you sit down and write that question out, then write a list of maybe your top 3 to 5 values, family values. What does this family value? We value teamwork. We value talking through things. Respect is a tricky one because the definition of respect gets extremely skewed, especially when it comes to a parent who feels entitled over their child. Respect is a tricky one. So maybe we'll jump into the definition of respect.
We'll save the hard. Do the easy ones first. Save the hard ones.
But that's fine. Putting mutual respect down, but that also means you, the parent, are respecting your child and giving them a voice and doing listening to them and allowing them to negotiate and argue and all of the things. Respect doesn't mean that your child blindly obeys your orders. That is not respect. That's a foot soldier.
You have to come up with a kid. Why do the response from a kid will generally be, well, why do you get to? And it changes with age, right? With competence and with trust and demonstrated performance. Yes, I know you won't sneak out of the backyard. You haven't snuck out of the backyard. You respect that rule, so then you get to go out in the backyard and I don't have to be there with you.
Well, let me ask you this. What drives a child to respect a rule, if you can't use punishment, okay, you can't use punishment or consequences to
Shame.
force your child to respect a rule,
Mhm.
what then causes your child to respect a rule?
Shared value. They have to be able.
And
They have to be
mhm,
able to hold the same value you do on. Little kids are unaware that they're in danger
mhm,
a lot of times, little bitty ones.
mhm.
And so all you can do is have a didactic, boom, thou shalt not go past this point. You can't go over the crest of the road where I can't see you on your bike. There just has to be a limit.
If they can
It,
ride a bike, they can understand
yeah,
why
your
they're
kid,
not going over the crest of the hill.
yeah,
It
yeah,
it
back to
you it is
3-year-olds.
very, very early on that a child you can start having a logical discussion with a child about why a rule is in place for their safety, for them to
Yeah.
understand it.
And why I can do things that they can't,
Yeah.
right? I can use the stove. Let's talk about the stove. I can cook on the stove. You can get milk and cereal out, but you can't use the stove
Yet.
yet.
And you could help me cook and learn how to use the stove.
That's right.
And then and we'll work towards it together. And then someday you will be able to use the stove.
Yeah. And so that somehow has to become a shared value for them to respect that rule themselves, as opposed
Mhm.
to you turn around, leave the room, and they go and they want to go tinker with the stove.
So
Somehow there has
respect,
to
if
be
you
an
could had to say
understanding.
it in a couple of words, what is the foundation of bringing a child in to respect a rule that you have set for them?
Agreement is the first word that comes to mind. You have to
And
come to some kind of
how do you get
agreement.
how do you come to an agreement?
Mechanically, by talking,
Yeah.
by sharing
Talking.
values, by other stuff. Yeah.
Talking.
By,
You have to have a fucking conversation with your kids, and you might have to have it multiple times.
yeah.
Like, you have to talk to your children like they are intelligent
Yeah.
beings capable of understanding logic and rationality and safety. And they
Yeah.
are. I
Yeah.
promise.
Yeah.
They are.
If you teach them language and safety and rationality, and I
If
mean,
you talk to them.
that's all
Yeah.
part of the talking. Those are things you teach by talking. Yeah.
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 So
It's time
instead of
consuming to
you
raise
can't use
kids.
the stove because you're too little, because it's dangerous, because you're going to get burned.
Yeah.
Your kid's not going to buy into that.
Or you get burned and it's, I told you so.
Yeah. Ugh. So anyway,
Yeah.
so why boundaries? Boundaries create connection within the family. Do you even know what your boundaries are? Well, you don't unless you know what your values are, because boundaries are a value-based thing.
Yeah.
And in order to make them non-punitive, so not like non-punitive rules like God, I can't even think of one right now.
A non-punitive consequence.
So punitive, like it serves no purpose and it doesn't teach them anything. It's just you feel like you're in control and in power because you got to punish your kid. Or you set a boundary just because you can, versus it actually being something that matters as a family, and as a value that you want your child to grow up into.
So
So
that's kind of like a timeout for something trivial is
yeah,
what comes to
timeouts
my
are
mind.
dumb. There's no reason for timeouts.
I
They
told you
literally
not
don't
to
do
come in the
anything.
kitchen. Well, and that in my mind that touches on consistency. If your rules are always changing, that's hard for a kid to comply to.
Yeah.
It's like stay out of the kitchen while I'm doing something right
Mhm.
now. And if they violate, if they're running around and want to ask a question, they come in, and so then they get in trouble. You get angry, you get fed up. I have to get the floor mopped or whatever.
So let's use that. So that's good. Let's use that example,
Trying to
because that
imagine
one,
situations.
when I was, a couple years ago nannying for a family that had a 2 and a 3-year-old, brother and sister, and when it came time for me to make dinner it's like getting towards the end of the day, I'm all kind of like answering questions. I'm over
Everybody's
it.
wore out.
I just give me 15 minutes to like think straight and put a fucking meal together.
Mm-hmm.
You guys go play in the living room. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
The phrase, you guys go play in the living room, don't come in the kitchen. That's a directive, right? That's a directive, an order, it's you
A
go
wish.
do this. Yeah. A hope, a prayer.
Please.
Keep
Keep in mind, we're all doing this exhausted and
Yes.
about a second from exploding just because of all that stuff going on. That's what makes this the challenge. We're not all just sitting here calmly on an afternoon going
la-di-da. So you've asked your children, however many of them there are, you guys need to go play outside. You guys need to go play in the living room. Don't come in the kitchen. That's your directive, okay? And then 2 seconds later, one of them comes running into the kitchen and is like, "Look what I found!"
That's right.
A crumb,
exuberant,
or an old sticker that's lost its sticky or whatever it is that they. And you're like, "Oh, that's so cool!" Like, but I need you to not be in the kitchen.
Yeah.
Okay, and they run away and back out to the living room, and you're like, "Oh, thank God!"
Yeah,
and then 90 seconds later, one of them comes running back in, or they're playing tag and one of them comes and runs behind your legs to hide from their sibling.
Yeah.
Or whatever. Cause they're goldfish. They have the memory of a,
because their
attention
span is about 90 seconds. Yeah.
And you remind them, guys, you need to go play tag in the living room.
Yeah.
And like maybe they ignore you, maybe they don't hear you, maybe they're talking to each other, maybe they're running around like chickens with their head cut off, they don't hear you. Like whatever you do to get their attention, like you raise your voice or you repeat yourself, whatever it is you're doing, you are repeatedly setting a boundary that they are not buying into.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So how do we get our kids, even our young kids, to buy into a boundary that doesn't need to be repeated? Because every time you have to repeat the boundary, it loses its value to your child.
Sure.
You're not setting it effectively enough.
You're not hitting them hard enough. You're not shouting loud enough.
Oh my God. I'm not editing that one out.
I know, that was the intent. That's the, how do I get these kids' attention?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
And this is where parent exhaustion.
Or do I give up the boundary?
Yeah. Or do I give up?
Give up the boundary. It's like, what's so bad about having them underfoot?
Yeah. So
you adjust, you adapt.
So we either become permissive or we become authoritarian. In those moments when things get really hard, we get exhausted, we think we keep setting a boundary, they're just not listening to me, and woe is me, I'm a victim.
Yeah.
It's called victim mindset, parents.
Well,
we all do it.
Yeah, I wouldn't go that far, but yeah, woe is me. Yeah.
Woe is me. And you either choose an authoritarian route and you yell and you make it, you threaten punishment. And if you come in this kitchen one more time, you're not getting dessert. You're not getting this. I'm taking your toy away.
Raise the stakes.
Or you just give up and let them play at your feet and trip and hopefully you don't die making dinner. Yeah. Okay. There is a better way. I promise. Okay. Instead of setting a boundary with a directive or a request, we are going to, instead of setting it multiple times over and over again, which if you add up all the times that you have to make the request, it's going to take 3, 5, 10 minutes of your time.
Yeah.
Right?
That's the trigger.
Instead,
hey, I've done this 3 times now. Yeah.
At the front end, we know 5 o'clock, I need to make dinner. And I need them to just get out of here for 15 minutes. So what you're going to do is you're going to say, you bring them in, get their attention, whatever it is. You're like, guys, it's time for me to cook dinner. And depending on where you're at, well, we're not going to use an example of a day where you're cooking dinner and you're letting them help. Okay. So today is not that day.
Well, there
Maybe
you go.
6 other days a week, you bring your kids in and they get to help make dinner and you have fun and they learn a new skill and it's great. But this particular day, you just need 15 minutes alone in the
This
kitchen.
involves a big pot of hot oil, and you don't want them in the room with you.
Well, or you're just tapped out. So you're setting
Yeah.
a boundary because I'm going to use myself. I'm setting a boundary because it's been a really long day. I know that
Self-care.
I am about to snap. And if I snap, it's going to cause harm
Oh, okay.
to them.
Regulation. Okay.
So
Yeah.
I am self-identifying my boundary, my limits, of my capabilities, and I'm choosing to give myself a few minutes
There you go.
to chill out, calm down, get a little less overstimulated, and
Take the edge
I
off,
need
yeah.
my kid and I need the kids to cooperate. So how am I going to
Yeah.
do that without begging, repeating, pleading, punishing,
And effectively do
bargaining,
it.
bribing? We don't need to bribe. Okay, all of these things we can throw out the door. You bring them in, say, guys, it's almost dinner time. I need to make dinner and I need to be alone for a few minutes. And they're like, okay, blah, 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 blah. And you're like, so what that means is, so here's where the value comes in. And this is what I would say to them. Jenny is not feeling good because they were 2 and 3. So language around this with a 12-year-old is going to look different, right? Your 12-year-old, you can say, I'm really tired. I'm feeling very frustrated and cranky, and I need 15 minutes to myself. Is there something that you can go do? Is there something you want to do for the next 15 minutes that will keep you out of the kitchen, right? For a 12-year-old. And it's like, maybe I'll go read a book or I'll go watch a TV show or whatever.
Yeah.
With a 2 and 3-year-old, it's Jenny doesn't feel good and I need some quiet and some space.
Yeah.
I'm feeling, or even if it's a 2 and 3-year-old, and we're talking about emotions, I'm feeling really angry and I need to be alone for a few minutes. I'm not feeling, I don't feel good. And if you've had even one conversation with your 2 and 3-year-old about their feelings, their frustration, their anger, their sadness, they've probably either taken some time for themselves to go read a book and calm down, or they've talked to you and like hugged you in order to calm down. Like your kid knows what anger is, okay? And they know what it feels like in their body. And if you've never done any of that, then this is going to take you a few tries. But anyway, I would say to them, Jenny is feeling really angry and really frustrated, and I just need a few minutes of quiet, and I need you guys to not talk to me for a few minutes because I'm not feeling good. So it's not about them doing something wrong. It's not about them being annoying. It's not about them being loud. It's about me needing some quiet time.
That's right.
I need this. And then you ask a question.
Make the ask.
So okay, developmentally, a 2 and a 3-year-old have the attention span of a goldfish. So they are not going to be able to independently go into that room and play consistently for 15 minutes without needing you.
Check their watches. Yeah.
Okay. Especially if they, like when they play together, kids get out of hand, someone gets hurt, all these things happen. So what you're going to do is you're going to say, I'm going to make up fake names here. I'm going to say, Susie, what do you want to do for the next 15 minutes?
There you go.
In the living room. You can go pick anything. You can go read a book. You can go play with the Uno cards. You can go play with any toy that you want. What do you want to do for the next 15 minutes? And that opens up her world. That's not go read a book, go play in the living room, go do this. Like you're not telling them what to do. You're saying, I need this. And so from that boundary, what is you have all these other choices of things to go do. And she's going to say, I want to go play with blah, 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 whatever. And then you're like, great, go get it out, take it to the living room, like get going. And she's going to run away and be excited to do whatever it is she wants to do. And then you're going to turn to the other one. And then you're going to say, Johnny, what do you want to do for the next 15 minutes? I want to go in the basement and play my drums, or I want to go, do this or read a book or whatever. awesome. Go get it. You got it. Whatever you want, go do it, and they get to go pick something. The world is wide open. They're not being told to go away. They're not being told they're too loud or too annoying or too frustrating. They're not anything, because the way we feel is our responsibility. Us being tired, we don't get to blame our children for that.
Right.
Like, it just is. I'm tired and I need this.
It's part of parenting.
Yeah.
Any kind of caretaking, really. If you're an adult taking care of your parents or something, that's one of the challenges. It is exhausting. It's rewarding, but it is tiring.
Yeah.
There's
and depending on age,
sugarcoating it.
Because in an adult relationship, there's reciprocation in boundary setting. There's having your needs met by your significant other. So you can say, I'm at like 10%. I had a really bad day. I really just need to be alone and run a bath and go to bed tonight. And then your partner hopefully responds with, that's great. Or I'm sorry you had a bad day. I love
That's
you.
Great.
My husband has run the bath for me so that it's actually done by the time I get home, and I don't have to worry about scrubbing the tub and running the bath and doing the things. He takes 10 minutes and does that so that when I get home, I can just die into the bathtub. And so there's an opportunity for him to give me a little love, a little extra TLC, and I in return feel loved and cared for and more connected to my husband, right? Because I let him know how I was feeling. I let him know where I was at. And so he knew that when I came home, it was not the time to talk to me about anything, ask me for anything. And in fact, he entered a place of service and caretaking. And he does the same thing. He'll text me before he leaves work. I'm at 0%. I'm at 30%. I helped somebody die today. Like, I want to hear about your day, but like, I can't be dumped on the minute I walk through the door. And then I'm like, okay,
just everybody knows. Back to aligning the doors and the boundaries is it's like, here we know what we're expecting, instead of coming in, somebody wanting something, somebody not, wanting something else, and just having wants bouncing off of each other until somebody gets PO'd.
And expectations.
Yeah.
The way we normally connect is that you come home and I tell you all about my day and a frenzy and excitement, and on this particular day, that is not the door for connection with him. On this particular day, the door he has just given me is that I can open is to be calm and give him a kiss and welcome him home and tell him I love him, and then let him be in a quiet space. I don't need to unload my day on him. That's the door I get to open.
Go work. Go sit in a dark room
because he told me where he's at and what his needs are, and set a boundary.
Yeah.
So just like with our kids, back to our little tiny ones example, is we are letting our child know how we are feeling, what we need, and our children are not there, especially that young, are not there to serve us or meet our needs.
That's a big one.
But it is important that we model that we are meeting our own needs right now, right?
Yeah.
By taking a break. And so when your kids get older, the way that this becomes a two-way street when they're older. Now, I really want to reiterate this. Kids are never responsible for meeting a parent's needs.
Yeah.
Ever.
Yeah.
You don't ever get to burden your children with guilt or demand to meet your needs. They are the child. You are the parent. So,
but you're training
respect.
them. You're training them to recognize other people have needs, because kids don't recognize other people's needs. So it requires training so that when they do get older and they are 12 and around other kids that have needs, they can get along in a group, because they're not the only one with a need.
Well, and you're teaching them to respect your needs.
Yeah, exactly. Which is
not meet your need, but respect your need.
There you go.
I'm going to meet my need, or I'm going to go to my partner to get my needs met, or I'm going to call a
That's a good
friend to get my
distinction.
needs met.
Yeah.
But I am going to let my child know that I have needs and that I am going to handle those needs. The boundary comes with, I need you to choose an activity, or I need you to, go do this. So if
Mhm.
it's the boundary of needing space and time,
Mhm.
etc.
Mhm.
So as children get older, so as we enter the 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, an older phase of life, where our conversations with our children become even, more and more rational and logical, and their development and brains are growing into understanding abstract thought and nuance and all of these things, they can be invited in to a more reciprocal relationship. And they're still not responsible for meeting your needs ever.
Yeah.
However, when you're 7, when you need to cook dinner and your child is now 7, right? You've been saying this to them since they were 3. Your child is now 7. You say, I am really frustrated. I'm really overwhelmed today. I'm really like, my ears are ringing and I just need some quiet right now. You can say, I need to be alone in the kitchen. What would you like to go do? And you can prompt that. But by the time they're 7 and you've been doing this over and over again for several years, they will likely say, okay, mom, I'm sorry you're feeling like that, and give you a hug and go pick something to do themselves.
It'll become a habit or a routine. I
It's
mean, we
just
tend to
normal.
get
It'll
it's
just be, okay, mom needs some space.
yeah,
And they don't take it personally. It's not their fault that you need space.
yeah,
They just, mom is upset and wants to be alone for a few minutes, and there's
yeah,
nothing wrong with
yeah.
that.
And then be prepared for them to do the same thing to you. They come home from school,
Yes.
have a bad day. That's the real gratification. And you
Hmm.
go, "Hey, honey, how was your day?" And they're like, "I just need to go to my room for a while,"
Yes.
or I need to watch TV for a while,
And
or
you get the opportunity to not take it personally
and
either.
you have to go, "Yeah," and then you have to reciprocate, or
And you have to say,
modeling
thank
out the
you.
window.
Thank you for telling me your needs. Like, go do
Yeah,
that. I'm glad you're
yeah,
taking care of yourself.
yeah. I'm so bad at that. Validate the feeling. Yeah.
So, okay, let's see here. Da-da-da-da-da-da-da. Okay, so let's talk about something that's like a less personal boundary. I think personal boundaries are a little bit clearer of an example, but I want to do one that's more like a parenting conundrum of like a teenager getting to go to a party
Ooh,
or following a household rule, that's based on
the
a
zen,
value.
the zen of parenting. We're going to do
And
conundrums.
so, ooh, maybe I should, let's see.
Personal boundary.
I've got one.
Tribal
So,
stuff. Tribal stuff.
uh, not even tribal stuff. Just, this is a value based one.
Mhm.
So we did a respect and meeting needs one. Let's do a
Mhm.
values / household rules one. And say that your child is involved in sports. Okay. And this is, I already know the example you might bring up, but
Okay.
say your child is involved in a sport or multiple sports, and
Alright.
say that your child comes home from school and tells you, I don't want to go to practice tonight. I'm
Yeah.
overwhelmed. I'm frustrated. I had 2 tests today. My brain is like, I just want to go to my room and be alone tonight.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, the conundrum as a parent is, you committed to being on this team, you need to go to practice, or my child is telling me what their needs are in this moment, and I need to respect those.
Yeah. How old
Both
again?
are values. Well,
This
let's
is like
call this
middle school, high school, organized
10 or
sports kind of
11,
thing?
10 or 11 or
Younger,
12.
grade school. Okay.
Well, that's middle school. 11, 12, 13 is middle school. But
Okay.
so yeah, grade school, middle school, teenager, doesn't matter. your family values showing up for your commitments.
Yeah.
Okay. Showing up for your teammates, right? You don't get to skip practice. Your teammates are all going to go. Suck it up. Whatever. But I also value that my child knows themselves and has tuned into themselves and is feeling, their body's tired, their brain is tired, and they're saying they need a break tonight. And just because practice happens to fall on this night, does that mean that my child has to ignore how they're feeling and force themselves to go?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And this is a tricky one because both are values, both are valid, right?
But they're in conflict at the moment.
And how in that moment do you navigate that and come up with there is no right answer. Do you come up with an answer?
Mm-hmm.
Do you tell your child, too bad, you're committed, you need to show up to practice? Do you you say, okay, like I hear you're struggling today. It's okay to miss one practice every once in a while. Is it like the 4,000th time they've tried to skip practice?
Exactly.
There's a lot of factors that would go into this.
I think the general methodology is the same as you talked about with the little kids, which is you don't lay down, you talk with them, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's a discussion. It's a chance to discuss values and the relative priority or values, right? I used to work for a guy, and I was not real good. I was not real fond of him in Pittsburgh because you'd have 64 things to do. There'd be an unreasonable number of items of things to get done, and they needed to be done by Friday, and you'd go to him a couple weeks in advance and say, you take a list. You don't just go in helpless and you say, look, here's estimated hours on all these things. I'm not going to be here 24/7 and be two people for the next 2 weeks. This is not all going to get done. Help me prioritize these. And his answer was always, everything is priority one. And that taught me very, very early on in my career, you have to prioritize things.
Yeah.
And it's fun to go through a list and say A, B, C. You can go through a list of 50 things and say these are A's, these are B's, these are C's. But at some point, the discussion becomes which is 1, which is 2, which is 3, which is 4. It's nobody gets the same priority number in some situations. And so
at different times and in different situations, the priority number one is different.
Yeah, exactly. And so that's the discussion to be had is, okay, to recognize, we talk, we validate, I get it, having a hard day, So and knowing the values, having these discussions about values and making these decisions based on values, not on how I feel right now, right? Switching it over to, because you can't push through. A lot of life is, I don't really feel like it, but I need to do this anyway. I'm hungry. I don't feel like hunting. I need to go get food. My kids are hungry, So there's a certain amount of that in parenting. Supplying things, and then you have to decide what other things to drop because I don't have enough time for hunting, or I'm too worn down to go hunting, so I need to quit staying up all night drinking. And that's just kind of you have to start picking and choosing activities because there's just the same 24 hours. So you sit down, you talk about the values. We value, you made a commitment to the team. I understand you had a bad day. A lot of times I've found that having the talk makes it possible to go to practice, right?
Because they don't feel alone.
Yeah.
They feel like, okay, like getting almost like talking about how exhausted they are and how pissed off or how frustrated or whatever, how they're feeling, just
Yeah.
getting it out of their body
Yeah.
makes them feel better enough to be able to
Being
go
heard.
to practice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Being heard is very helpful for us. That's why it's important. And guys don't get that a lot. They just swear, or they don't get to. Guys don't let each other do that so much. They're like, knock it off or whatever. But sit down, have the talk through the values, and don't make it so intense. When I was doing that with you guys, I was probably a little too intense on, well, let's make a table and let's put values over here and assign, and being a little too linear about it. But get them talking about the values and let them decide. Don't tell them it's okay to take the night off. You go, okay, well, what do you think now?
Yeah.
And
Who
if they're still
do you want to
conflicted,
be? The buy-in that you want in order to set a boundary once, you have to have their buy-in. And in order to get a child's buy-in, you have to be transparent and honest with them. You can't
yeah,
just give demands and expect them to be followed.
yeah, arbitrary, do it this way because I've always done it this way, or my parent did it this way. That's not good.
Or simply that I'm telling you what to do and I'm your parent and you need to
Yeah,
listen to
even
me.
worse. Yeah, the authoritarian, just do it because I said so.
Mm-hmm.
That's not. I don't believe that's the path. That's the path.
Not
The
if you want
discussion.
actual buy-in. If you want them to actually hear you and listen and act in the way that you're requesting they act,
yeah,
a demand for obedience is not going to get it.
That requires self-awareness, though. So you have to build that in a parent, in yourself as a parent. You have to be able to have the discussion and be willing to live with the result.
Yeah.
So what's the value here? What are we going for here? Is that a good value? Why is that a good value? Okay. And so the earlier you start, even if you're just starting this with teenagers, this has a tremendous amount of value. If it only starts a week before they leave home.
Oh my God, navigating teenagers is such a critical time.
Yeah. It snaps into their brain and can take hold. A good idea, a good healthy habit can take hold and can take hold in a short time. If it's something that you've been able to do since they were born, you've had it in yourself and been working on yourself and working on the kids, it's just they become super people.
If this is something you're presenting the week before your child leaves home to fly, whether it's college or trade school or a job or whatever, they're moving out for the first time or going out on their own for the first time or whatever it is, even if you're kind of late in the game, it's, especially even the older they are, it's even more important to be transparent. Not all like all of a sudden switch how you're approaching your child, but because you're going to confuse them if they've had 17 years of you acting one way, they're going to be like, I'm sorry, what did you just ask me about how I feel about something? Like, what?
What are you trying to do?
Be transparent about the fact that, hey, I've been listening to this podcast. Hey, I've been getting some parent coaching. Hey, I've come across, in whatever capacity that you have, I've come across this new information and I really want to be the best parent. I'm imperfect, but I want to be the best parent I can be for you. And I want us to have an amazing relationship. And so I want to try this new way of talking to you. I want to try this new way.
I just figured something out. I wish I'd been doing for years. Yeah.
And be so transparent. You feel like you're over communicating. That's something I got from marriage advice. I forget where I read it. I think it was in a book somewhere, but it was like, if you don't feel like you are over communicating constantly, you're not communicating enough. You should feel like you are over communicating.
That's true. I get that sometimes. Yeah.
Because then you might actually be communicating enough to maintain a healthy relationship and knowledge of each other. So boundaries, I just want to review, boundary setting comes from knowing your values, the values you want to instill, the boundaries you want to set within those values, you know, and then enforcing them in a way that is kind but firm, and setting your children up for success
Yeah.
to listen and respect them, not
Yeah.
arbitrary demands and repeated, etc. And
Yeah.
the reason that it's important for your boundaries to remain consistent and for you enforcing them consistently is not arbitrary either. It's not about your children seeing you as this person who will never waver on these rules,
Yeah.
or you being a perfect person who always follows these rules and these boundaries and these values, and I don't ever mess up and I don't ever break my own rules, because
Yeah.
everyone is human and we all have bad days and it's going to happen. The
Yeah.
importance of you being consistent with your boundaries and your values is that you are creating security, reliability, and trust for your kids.
Predictability.
Your
Yeah.
kids are going to trust you and rely on you and and tell you things. They're going to confide in you. They're going to have hard conversations with you about things that most teenagers and kids would hide. But the other thing is that when you are having those conversations with your child, when you are receiving their opinions, their arguments, their reasoning, and you're giving respect and acceptance to those things, and then you're also reciprocating with your own, like, this is a safety issue. This is why I feel that this boundary is really important. This
In
is
my
the
life.
value
Yeah.
that I want you to have. When your children are older and they feel like they can trust you with something that maybe they are feeling some shame about, that maybe they made a mistake, maybe they want to request, like, hey, I've really been doing great with getting home on time, I'd like to extend my curfew. Instead of staying out later and just ignoring the rule, they're going to
Mm-hmm.
come to you first, and you guys are going to be able to have like a conversation around, I can trust my parent to hear me out and make a decision with me, not blindly enforce a rule, so that my only choice to get what I want is to break the rule,
Is to
ignore
lie.
them,
Yeah.
disrespect, lie, etc.
Yeah.
So your child, like, you're going to have a lot less fighting, a lot less rebelling, a lot less pushback, a lot less like your kid mouthing off to you. All of those things that people hate
Mm-hmm.
about teenagers go away
Mm-hmm.
when you've been respecting them as a person
Mm-hmm.
since they were little.
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
if you're starting right now and you have a teenager, give it some time and it will go away, and you will
Yeah.
have a respectful child.
Get used to get okay with working things out with your kids. The older they get, the better, because that's right. They don't
Mhm.
feel they need to deceive you. They don't feel the only way to get what they really want. If they come up with a good reason not to go to basketball practice, it's like,
Mhm.
well, I puked or whatever. If they know that you will hear it out and weigh it against your experience. Which is all we really have, and is
Mhm.
just good, bad, or indifferent, and discuss them. And especially if, by and large, you let them make the decision, they're just sorting
Mhm.
it out and letting you know. They're not afraid to let you know things because they
Mhm.
know it will. Okay, it may result in a lecture or a talk. We're gonna have to have a talk.
Yeah.
But okay, then they're not carrying around. When you lie and do that kind of stuff, it makes you feel bad. That
Mhm.
you're being deceptive.
And it
Deception doesn't
stresses you
feel
out. The
good.
person who
Yeah.
lies is stressed trying to, like, keep the lie going.
Yeah. So if somebody is habitually deceiving you, then there's a problem there. You need to make sure
With
it's
you.
not on your side. Yeah, I mean
Mhm.
it's a good in a normal healthy thing. It's with you. If it's like, well, we talk all the time and make sure the doors are open. I love that metaphor. I gotta work on that lining the doors up and the boundaries up metaphor. Make a door that matches their door. Give and take.
Well, it's not even about matching the door. It's about when you are setting a boundary with someone,
Mm-hmm.
the mindset shift for you is I want to open a door, not build a wall. How can I open a door to this person who I care about and who I want to hear me and know how to communicate with me and have my needs met? So how can I open a door to them instead of just build a wall and tell them to like leave me alone?
Or make a door where I didn't have one before. Maybe you communicate in a new way, and I'm like, oh, this is a new way. And there's that resilience and adapting that has to go on. Communications is a terrific thing to have with your kids.
Is that there's boundaries that you're gonna set between parents and children, and then there's boundaries, and then there's teaching your child in relationship to other people how to hold their boundaries,
their own boundaries,
and also how to respect like their siblings' boundaries or a friend's boundaries or whatever.
Mm-hmm. And maybe that's another episode if you want to dig real into it. That's kind of here's the parent-child thing, but then how to manage your own boundaries at different ages. Maybe that's a whole nother thing.
How to set boundaries as a relational parent, and episode 2 will be how to help your child cultivate boundaries with anyone except you. So other family members, with friends, with teachers, with how to express their boundaries. To express their boundaries. Okay, episode 2. So you guys, our next episode, we have 3 weeks in a row of guests. So episode 2 of Boundaries will be on October 20th.
Okay. Well, we can talk, we can touch on it now if you want. I mean, get going. We were starting with like write down boundaries, write down, there's some thought to be done at least about that, or what's a value, what's a boundary, what are my values.
Empowering, what I want to touch on, and it's more than just a mention at the end of this episode, is how to letting your child, when grandma comes over and saying, go hug grandma, what if if your child doesn't want to hug grandma because they're 4 and don't really know grandma that well yet, they're not comfortable with it. Your job is to let grandma know, like, if she doesn't want to hug you, she doesn't have to hug you. She can say hi. She can give you a high five. She can say nothing.
You can say that as a reminder, it's not good to do it as a command so much.
Yeah.
Right. A lot of times
the question is, how do you want to say hi to grandma?
Yeah.
And then let them choose. Do you want to give her a high five? Do you want to just say hi and wave? Do you want to give her a hug? Do you want a fist bump? There's a lot of ways to greet people. So we don't have to pigeonhole our children. We can respect our children's boundaries and still teach them, hey, you need to say hello to this person who has entered our home. That's how we act.
That's right. It expresses our values. This is how we act in this home.
So, okay. So the next 3 weeks we have guests. Next week is Emily Blake, who created a co-living paradigm for single moms.
Cool.
And she's a single mom, and she's been creating her own like village for co-parenting single moms together. And she's doing a whole bunch of other really cool stuff with her company as well. So 2 separate things, her as a parent and her as a company.
And there's so much of that out there. That could just be everywhere. Yeah.
And then Veronique is coming back we're going to jump a little bit more into LGBTQIA plus stuff with parenting, and specifically focusing on gender. And then Rebecca Mass, who is a medical detective in rare diseases. She's an NP, I believe, and she specializes in people who can't figure out what the hell is wrong with them. They go to her, and she figures out. She's like House, that show House.
A diagnostician.
She is in rare, weird diseases.
That's a specialty. Sometimes picking it apart is a whole job by itself.
So those are our next 3 guests. I haven't mentioned this in the last few weeks, but we are still running our sponsorship campaign. So if you're listening and you haven't downloaded or listened to all the episodes, if you haven't clicked follow yet, if you haven't given us a review yet, or if you haven't clicked subscribe on YouTube, please do that. Please do it right now so you don't forget.
Click all the buttons you can. It helps the algorithms.
Yeah, and click
Do
download.
everything you can do.
And it's all free to you. It doesn't cost you anything. Just click, because then our numbers will hit a point where sponsorship will be able to get more sponsorships and be able to keep doing this. So please click all of the buttons. You can click download on all the episodes, and you don't have to listen to all of them right now. You can spend 6 months listening to them. You just click the download button, and then it's just like saved in your Spotify. It doesn't do anything. So
just click. And if there's anything you want us to talk about, absolutely, send us a comment and email, and we will try to accommodate absolutely as quick as we can.
Let us know what your parenting struggle is or whatever you're trying to figure out, and we'll do a whole episode on it.
Or if you've got a tricky question, you just want to hear us talk about something tricky.
Yeah. Ooh. Yeah. Challenge us.
Gotcha stuff.
See if you can, see if we should do
Bring it
gotcha
on.
episodes. If we get enough, my dream is to get enough emails and questions that we can do like a once a month episode that's all, where we kind of like speed round answer like multiple questions for people.
Yeah. Somebody had this weird situation, or what do you do here? And the kind of where sometimes the rules have to be suspended or changed or whatever. Yeah.
The other thing that you guys can do is click the share button and send it to all of your parenting friends and just say, hey, I really want to support this podcast. Like, check it out, whatever. So yeah, help us out. We're here to help you out, and let us know what you want to hear. Cool. And thanks for being here, guys. All right. Well. Happy parenting and good luck out there. Well, did you learn anything new? Or have you heard all of this before? Do you agree with us, disagree with us, have a question? We want to see you in our inbox or via the Patreon page in the show notes. Tap on either link to send us your feedback, share your own parenting story, or support our mission of providing a connected community for all parents. And don't forget to hit subscribe so you never miss an episode. If you loved this episode, click on that little star and give us 5 of them so we can get visible to other parents who are looking for us. This is your weekly reminder. Parents, you already have everything you need inside of you. You are a strong, loving, capable parent. And here, you are never alone. I'll see you next week.